Okay, so how do you cook eggs to have the most benefit from eggs? And it's true, you want to have like soft boiled or over easy. You don't want to do a lot of manipulation of the egg or give it a lot of high temperature, because then it will start to change some of the properties in the yolk. Maybe not so much the cholesterol, but it may start to break down the lecithin, which helps us to process the cholesterol in the egg yolk. So it is true that you'd rather do like poached or soft boiled than scrambled or, you know, fried at a high temperature. Yes?
How do you feel about soy and its estrogenic properties?
Well, soy is another healthy food. The FDA has allowed a health claim that says, you know, if you have so much soy in your diet, it actually can lower your risk for cholesterol. But that's because in the American diet, when you're eating soy, you're typically replacing a high-fat animal protein with soy. And so in that way, if you can replace your animal fat with a soy protein, that's very beneficial. Soy can help lower cholesterol. The phytoestrogenic properties of soy, on a long-term basis, it seems like if you have these in your diet all your life, that you actually will lower your risk for things like estrogen-based cancers, like breast cancer. The problem is when the typical American goes, well, more is better. And they start doing soy protein in the morning, and they have their soy protein bars, and then they have their soy snacks, and then they have soy everything. You actually can start to develop too much soy in your diet. The phytoestrogenic properties of soy can vary from compound to compound. So, I mean, there's even debate about whether women that are breast cancer survivors that had estrogen-positive breast cancer should be eating soy or not. And for the most part, everyone says we're not really sure, so it's better if you don't. But if you can tolerate soy, soy is, of course, one of the top 5 food allergies. So first of all, if you can tolerate soy, and you want to use it instead of an animal protein, I think it's probably a good choice. You get into the fermented versus not fermented, and typically the compounds that are in soy that may inhibit protein digestion, it seems that we have enough bacteria in our own digestive tract that we ferment it anyway, more or less, when we eat it. So it doesn't seem like it makes that much of a difference whether it's fermented or not fermented. I find that if you use a lot of soy protein powder, that sometimes that can kind of lead you down the pathway of developing a soy allergy. So I usually ask people to rotate their protein powders. If you're going to use protein powder in the morning, maybe get soy this time, or rice protein, or modified whey protein, or flax or hemp, or, you know, mix up your types of protein powders, not to use soy all the time. And the whole thing about soy inhibiting the thyroid is probably not really true. The only place where I do have some concerns about the phytoestrogenic properties is when you're using soy-based formulas for babies. And that is their only protein source they are getting, because then you're really concentrating the amount of phytoestrogens that the child is getting. So that's the whole kind of soy controversy in a nutshell. Any other questions?
So how would I raise my cortisol for the morning?
You want to make sure that you lower it at night, so that, you know, towards the end of the day, that you're not doing things that are stressful at night.
Okay.
You want to exercise during the day, earlier in the day, in the afternoon, so that you can bleed off a lot of that stress. Because if your cortisol is high at night, then it's going to not be available in the morning. And then you want to try and do a regular cycle. You want to try and go to bed at the same time and get up at the same time. And you want to make sure you're balancing your blood sugar, because anytime your blood sugar drops, your body perceives it as a stress and releases cortisol, because cortisol will help raise your blood sugar.
Okay.
So another way to help balance cortisol levels is to balance your blood sugar. And then there's things like, you know, vitamin C and B vitamins, and there's some herbs, adaptogenic herbs like rhodiola and licorice root that can be very helpful.
Okay.
And beyond that, I think if you can find a naturopath to work with and maybe get a cortisol test, if you're concerned that cortisol is an issue for you, to get a salivary cortisol test done, and then based on the results of that, you can get into some more fine-tuning with specific things like DHEA and even cortisol supplementation, which is a prescription item, you know. But you really need to know the facts before you go that deep into it. And that's why I don't recommend people just arbitrarily use DHEA, because it's a hormone and it can imbalance the cortisol cycle.
Okay. You
Yes.
have one more question.
Okay, go ahead.
Behind me, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
Let me go ahead.
Okay.
In regards to vitamins, have you heard of vitamin B17, which is supposed to
Okay, vitamin B17, I think I remember it's also called amygdalin.
yeah, amygdalin,
And that again is related to the pith from certain stone fruits like apricot.
it's supposed to be cancer fighter.
You know, it's tough to say exactly. When the term vitamin is a term that was developed based on the fact that it's something found typically in our diet that when lacking causes a specific vitamin deficiency disease. So the B vitamins, you know, the lack of thiamine causes beriberi, a lack of vitamin C causes scurvy. So to call it like B17 is kind of, I think, a misterm, because it's not, you know, we don't really have a recommended daily allowance for Laetrile or amygdalin in our diet. We don't have a specific vitamin deficiency disease that's caused when it's not in our diet, unless you consider the epidemic of cancer. But cancer is a multifactorial disease, you know, and so I think I'd rather look at it as like an antioxidant or like a phytonutrient. Plants, you know, plants, when they grow, they don't have the ability to get up and walk away from what's ever bad in their environment. So they've got to actually create some chemicals inside themselves to help them deal with too much sunshine or too little water or all these plants around them or these insects. They make all these wonderful essential oils to discourage the insects from eating them. And we get to benefit from that. And so some of those phytonutrients can help us to deal with things like too much radiation in our environment, too much, you know, sunlight, pollution, those kinds of things. And so I like to look at things like that as not so much as a vitamin, but as a phytonutrient that can help us deal with our stressful environment.
If I recall, because I took from the last course I took with the vitamins and minerals, that the FDA had approved, or B17 you can't get like as a supplement in the United States.
Again, going back to the B17 or amygdalin, the problem with Laetrile is that it comes from the pith of stone fruits, and the pith of stone fruits also happens to be very naturally high in cyanide compounds. And so there's this issue about the safety of some of these supplements. And part of the actual Laetrile molecule, it has some cyanide in it. And so I think that's the issue. Remember, the FDA is all about safety. They're not really about healthy stuff. They're about keeping the public safe from bad things. And so if something has the potential for having cyanide in it, if something has the potential for injuring our liver, like the pyrolyzidine alkaloids in some of the herbs, like comfrey, they're going to be more concerned about that than they are about providing, you know, information on generally recognized as safe substances.
They also approve stuff that later.
Well, that's a whole nother story, like Tylenol and acetaminophen right now. You know, there's more liver transplants performed every year because of Tylenol than there are anything else. And that includes all the herbs that have ever been commercially produced.